In powerlifting, you want to have accessories that target weaknesses. Here's a guide for deadlifts, what accessories to do based on your weakness. Now, first weakness, strength off the floor. I think this is the worst sticking point to have. If you fail, it doesn't even move, it's lame. People who fail at lockout get to do 90% of the lift, but really you're just as close to hitting it when yours does not even move. Anyways, strength off the floor for both sumo and conventional mainly comes down to the quads, linked below to studies on muscular engagement. Now, assuming you're a powerlifter, training squats, you're going to be working your quads hard already. It could just be due to your leverages off the floor is the hardest. There are some people who may not be squatting or working quads enough, they're just more focused on the deadlift. In these cases, if you don't care about the squat necessarily, I do any variation you like that targets the quads. Isolation work can be good if you're needing to manage fatigue. Small tangent, fatigue is something else that can be killing your deadlifts. I see a lot of people whose deadlift suffers in training because they do it either after squats on the same day or always directly the day after a squat workout, leaving them fatigued. Try to get some deadlift workout fresh to get a better overall training effect on the lift. On the same note of fatigue, deadlift can be a fatiguing lift, particularly in the low back. In this case, less fatiguing variations can be good to do. Block pulls is a simple one. I like to go for just 1 or 2 inches to keep it more specific. Higher rep deadlifts counterintuitively can be better as well. This means more reps early in the set are easier and gives more skill practice, useful if you can't handle a lot of volume in sets. Beltless work is another good way to limit load while being very specific. Anyways, back to talking about weakness off the floor. The other issue here can be start position and technique. You want the bar properly over midfoot and to make sure your start position is efficient and also that you pull the slack out. For all of these issues, pause deadlifts work well. If the bar isn't over midfoot, you're going to feel off balance. Your body will naturally self-correct into a more efficient start position to make the pause easier, giving you direct proprioceptive feedback. You can also practice slack pulling with a bit slower application of force needed for pauses. If somebody has real issues, they can go with higher reps and longer pauses to start. These will use a bit less weight, so they're a bit easier, but as you get better, go for shorter pauses and lower reps to challenge yourself to do this with a bit heavier weight. For this issue in particular, go with pause deadlifts right off the floor. In some cases, weakness off the floor can come from not being aggressive enough, in which case, avoid doing pauses right off the floor. They will cause you to slow down in order to be able to pause, just making the issue worse. Another good start position variation is slow eccentrics. I have a whole video on these linked below. Basically, they teach start position by forcing you into an efficient position on the eccentric. These can be a warm-up drill, but in more extreme cases, I do use them as an accessory. Keep in mind though, they can be quite fatiguing and deadlifts are already fatiguing to begin with, so only do these if you can handle a good amount of deadlift volume. Now that handles off the floor issues, let's talk about midway in the lift. This is usually the rarest sticking point in my experience. Basic muscle engagement of the prime movers in the deadlift, quads are highly engaged at the start of the lift and drop off later. The hip extensors are less active off the floor but more engaged midway and closer to lockout. By the time we hit midway, we're at the point where the hip extensors become more dominant, so basically strengthen the hip extensors. Stiff-legged or Romanian deadlifts are a good way to also let us practice a hinge, important for good deadlift form. I recommend Romanians if you can't keep a strict hinge through a full stiff-legged deadlift range of motion. Usually people who aren't as good at hinging or have shorter arms. Isolation work of hip extensors can work well too. I like hyperextensions and reverse hypers since they still work hip extension directly. Now let's talk lockout. Usually this has to do with positioning. One issue can be midfoot position. If the bar isn't over midfoot, it's going to essentially pull us off balance and impair our lockout. You can see what that looks like here. When the bar is too far forwards, it pulls us that way. Now some people, mainly on sumo, lock their knees too early, causing them to be a bit off balance at lockout. Knee height pauses like I was doing earlier in the video are good to work this. Again, they'll force you not to lock out the knees too early because it will be really hard to hold that position if you do. Now, another cause for poor lockouts and deadlifts is a rounded upper back and a posteriorly rotated pelvis off the floor. These lower the moment arms off the floor by effectively shortening the torso. While they may cause lockout issues though, I don't really see it as wrong technique if you pull more weight overall. Something has to be a weak point. You can find many elite lifters who pull this way. If you naturally tend to pull this way too, it's probably strongest. You can try consciously extending your back and rotating your hips. I think you'll find that you just fail off the floor with even less weight. So if we're going to accept this, you can do targeted accessory work to help strengthen your ability to lock out, essentially uncurling. This includes fully extending the hips, extending the thoracic spine, and pulling the shoulder girdle back. A stiff-legged or Romanian deadlift is a good way to kill two of these birds with one stone again. They work the hip extensors as mentioned, but also spinal extensors too. As for retracting the shoulder girdle, we want to mainly target the upper traps. They have the highest activity, link below to the study on that. Shrugs are a good choice here, and I'll link below to also a more in-depth guide to targeting the upper traps specifically. Last issue, grip. If your grip strength is lacking, one easy thing to do is holds at the end of your sets, give you some extra stimulus. Barbell holds are really the best option. Grip strength is pretty joint angle specific. If you do other stuff like farmer's carries, aim for the same diameter as a barbell. You can also just do some sets where you do 1 rep, maybe with a block pull to make it easier, and just hold the failure if you really need extra work. So that's basically it. What accessories to do for every weak point in the deadlift. I hope this video helps you build your deadlift. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And once again, thanks for watching.